on today's episode of Out Loud and Laughing. And she basically was able to call out of thin air, who's Jose? And I'm just like, well, granted, Jose is a very common name, but she could have said Juan or Carlos or Marco or I don't know, anything. And she said Jose, and that was our grandfather's name. Welcome to another episode of Out Loud
and Laughing.
Get ready.
I'm Bryan.
And Jon, two gay cousins having big talks and even bigger laughs. Join us. Let's see what they're up to. It's Out Loud and Laughing.
Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud and Laughing. I am Bryan, and I am still with my cousin
Jon. That's me. Hi, everybody. Hi, Bryan.
Jon's still here.
Because you can't miss me. He does not stand in the corner.
If you're out loud and laughing by yourself, that's just kind of weird, you know? So
Out Loud and Laughing together is cool. Out Loud and Laughing alone is crazy. Let's just be honest.
Exactly. It is crazy. And like, especially like being in the city, like in the summer, all the crazies come out because they're not hiding from the cold, and they're talking to themselves a lot and stuff. So yeah, they are out loud and laughing, but in a very different context than the way we want our viewers to be out loud and laughing.
I mean, I don't know, Bryan. I did watch The Sixth Sense. We don't know who they're actually talking to, you know?
You know what? Good point. Listen, they might be talking to a ghost, a spirit, you know, something like that. So I agree.
Patrick Swayze from the movie Ghost.
Listen, they might be making pottery with someone behind them, which was by the hottest scene ever as a kid.
Oh my God. Talk about softcore porn. Oh my God. Every time I think about replicating that scene, though, as an old man, I'm just like, the mess.
I feel like you would also just be like, step away. This is my face, and you're ruining my art.
I was just going to say you're doing it wrong. Get out of the way. You're ruining my art on. Move out of the way. Get out of here.
Jon is like, I am not playing with ghosts with this. This is my art craft. Speaking of ghosts, I know you talked to a psychic recently after Brody
passed.
My God. I wanted to talk about that because you and I had really how does it go?
How does it go? You know, first and foremost, I think we should both start with, yes, I did see a psychic for Brody. I saw her 4 days after Brody's passing. So Brody passed on a Thursday. This was on a Monday, or 5 days, whatever that math becomes. And it wasn't good, but you know, I've had other psychic readings, and I've had other mediums that have done unbelievable things, like pull names out of thin air with details that really resonated. And this experience was not that. Have you ever gone to a psychic?
I have. One of my favorite cities, as you know, is New Orleans. I love, obviously, like the party and all that stuff is fun, but the food scene and everything. But it's obviously such a spiritual city, like a lot of psychics, a lot of tarot card readers and stuff. And so I like to play in that space. I'm a little bit of a skeptic for sure. But I also still am intrigued by it. So I've seen a couple of psychics in my day.
So my ex and I were part of a home exchange app. It's basically like The Holiday, but the movie The Holiday, but in real life, where Cameron Diaz and Kate Winslet switch houses. But we did that with a woman who we became close with, and then she actually shared with us afterwards that she was a medium. And again, very skeptical. I had my doubts, but then she would have sessions with my ex. And one day he said, "Do you want to sit next to me?" And I said, yes. Now, this was probably, I don't know, gosh, this was like 3 years ago. So ol&l, our grandfather, probably had been passed for about 7 years. She joked and said that I don't know why, but he keeps showing me like all of these pumpkins, and that made no sense to me. I was kind of skeptical of that at that point, but there were a few more things that she had mentioned, and then I took a lot of that information back to my mom, where she would say things like, "Oh, pumpkin's your grandmother's favorite food," and you know, in the spiritual realm, like they, you know, when from what I understand, anyways, when mediums connect with energies or spirits, sort of the way they operate is that they're reading a bunch of signs and images that are coming through their mind. And
Yeah.
not even sometimes they can decipher them, right? Because they don't have any context to them either. Well, after going back to my mom and telling her about that and that my grandmother loved pumpkin as a food, to me, that just validated that my grandfather was showing up and saying, "Hey, it's me. I know this fact about the woman who I was married to for almost 50 years." And so, you know, those types of experiences really get me energized because I do feel like the um I do feel like the invisible world is supporting the physical world, and I think that's, to me, is just comforting to some degree.
Yeah, because I've seen, I forget his name, Tyler, I believe. He's a medium on TV, and like I mean, there's plenty of them, right? I think we could talk about some of them, but
He's fabulous.
he is, and you see these moments where it does work, and people feel connected to someone on the other side because there's a couple of facts that just resonate with that person. So I definitely have seen it, and just never experienced it, right? And I have never firsthand have had like a good reading in that aspect. But also you and I haven't really, knock on wood, haven't really dealt with death as much as many other people have in our closer family. Like our grandfather and our grandmother just passed. But those two, you know, they were older, so that was fine. And then obviously your dog. So but that's kind of it, right? So when I think about like a medium and a psychic coming to do a reading and people are going to come through, you and I have like minimal options. Right? Oh, no, I guess it just hasn't happened for me yet. That's why I think I'm skeptical.
Yeah, no, I completely hear that. Other things that help me believe are watching like Teresa Caputo on the Long
Hmm.
Island Medium. Like I'll sit on my couch and watch some of these stories, and I'll just sob. I'll just sob because having now, unfortunately, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but when my grandmother passed, I wasn't grieving. There was sadness, but I wasn't grieving. I was really, really inspired by the length of her life and all the things that she had done. And to me, there was a
Yeah.
little bit more profundity there. But with Brody, for example, it's a little bit different. I cared for him every day. He was almost like a child to me. He
Yeah.
was young. There's so many more sad parts about it, and as the story pertains to it. Um, and if I'm being completely honest, I lost where I was going with that. But all's to say, we haven't dealt with grief, and we're very fortunate to not have. And so, the things that show up for us from a psychic medium is like our hamster
Yeah.
and a goldfish, like
Right.
a whole school of goldfish.
Yep.
You know,
It's
so
a couple of hamsters, school of goldfish, a cat or two. Uh, yeah, so nothing super, super deep. But do you remember? So I remember like when I was homesick a lot as a kid and we were left home alone because we were older. I would watch a lot of like Maury Povich and like all of them shows. And there was always this older lady. I think her name was like, I think it was Sylvia. She had like almost like a bob cut, like blonde hair, almost like a wig, it looked like. But she was so good. Like she would just call people out in the audience and it would be so real. So as a kid, whether that was staged or not, it just hit me where like, oh, okay, this feels very legit, you know?
absolutely. And let me just tell you a bit. I don't know why. Maybe because I was talking to a psychic and looking up psychic stuff, but my feeds started to pull some things up. And that woman Sylvia, I think she was on. Whose show she was on a lot. Who was uh the bald black guy? Uh, I have his face in
Montel,
my Montel
Montel Williams.
Williams. She was like a star guest on the Montel Williams show, and God, we're really showing our age. At least I didn't say Sally Jessy Raphael, but I think she was a guest on that too. But anyhow, on one of the Montel Williams show, I really hope it was scripted, Brian, because she has a woman stand up in the audience, and she's giving her a reading, and she's saying basically like, your mother held a secret from you your entire life and she never told you, and she's coming forward now and she wants to share it, and she puts this whole backstory, the anticipation is building, and she finally says, hold your balls, your dad is not your dad. I'm like, well, that's a bomb. That's a huge bomb. So she probably left there like, had a Broadway show planned later that night. I don't know where they filmed, but whatever, canceled all of her plans. Whatever was about to happen that night, she's like now on a mission to find out who her dad is. And I'm just like, damn, Sylvia, that's rich. That's rich TV right there.
Oh,
I
wow.
should follow. I
Miss
should follow up.
Well, you can't follow up with Sylvia because she died in 2013. I found,
Oh,
but you know, but at least she's a medium, so she should have known when she was gonna die. So that's it. But yeah, no, I agree. But yeah, let's just like, I want to know a little bit more about the Brody medium and how it went. Like, was it good?
oh, Brian, I have to tell you, it was not good. As a matter of fact, it was okay. So there's like not good, and then there's like so bad that it nearly felt exploitative. And I actually, so the reading was on Monday. I'll tell you about it. Tuesday, I didn't do anything because it just put a bad feeling in my mouth. And then on Wednesday, she asked for payment, at which point I drafted probably a 4 paragraph long text message explaining to her how I had felt the session had gone.
Mhm.
The end of that story is she texted me back and told me not to pay her anything. But and I didn't, and I don't feel bad about it. And I'll tell you why. Because upon reading something like my dog, which again, who knows, right? Who knows if it's
Yeah,
even possible? What I showed up for was to get thoughts or to get sort of answers or ideas around like what his life was like, some like things that maybe like he could allude to, like calling out like a toy or a bone or something random, just anything there was no validation. Unlike the abuelo Jose and pumpkin story, there was nothing, and as a matter of fact it was all incorrect. She would say things like um he's with your black cat from when you were a kid. And again, I went back to my mom. I'm like, Mom, can you remember any black cats that would be associated with me? And like, we thought about it. Like, well, trust me, because I
yeah,
didn't want to think that this woman was a fake or any of the sort. Because who would do that? And especially for somebody who's in mourning.
yeah,
Um, and so every single thing she had called out was incorrect. I forget what at least some of the other ones were. She called out a black cat. She told me that Brody was a double-headed dragon, and then I asked her what that meant, and she said, I don't know. And so double-headed dragon to me sounds like something people who study tarot cards or the celestials or whatever, they would have some sort of context as to what that meant or what the metaphor was for. No, she didn't give me that information.
yeah.
She would I would get emotional when I would like give her responses, which again were very vague, and I was trying not to divulge rather too much information. But she would then like lean into her hands as if she was about to cry, and she'd be like, "Mm." And so, and I was like, God, that's so like disingenuous. And then, and then the last thing that I'll say that stood out to me, because I recorded this whole thing.
Yeah.
I'll put a clip in the video, but there was a point where she said to me, you know, Brody didn't talk too much about his passing. And in her next sentence, she basically told me, she goes, "Oh, you never let him go, and you laid by him, and da 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 da." And like, I'm thinking to myself, like, this is what everybody does with their pet while they're getting put down. Nobody's sitting in a chair across the corner, like just watching them get stuck with the euthanasia, right? Like,
On
of
their on their
course not.
phone play on their phone playing Monopoly Go, like saying, "Are you finished yet?"
I mean, I did get a grinder, but I just checked it and I said I'll BRB and I said I'm killing my dog and
Here's my album. Here's my album. I'll come back later.
yeah, I'm putting one dog down. Maybe later you can put mine down. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Like, it just didn't feel right. And I think the word that really triggered her, because I'll tell you what her response was. uh, What triggered her was I said exploitative, and it felt exploitative. And I told her that I had sat on it for a night, and that I really like, I went internally and I sort of like trusted my
Yeah,
gut on this one because it wasn't the money. I would have paid her. I would have paid her anyways. That was another thing. It was my fault for not asking how long the session was. But if somebody gives you a rate, $120, that's what it was. You just assume that it's an hour,
yeah,
$2 an hour. The math sort of makes out. Our session ended awkwardly, by the way, because I have to say it was very uncomfortable to sit through, and I think she read that on my face. But
yep,
it ended at 37 minutes. And I just basically said to her, I was like, fine, then if your rate is $2 an hour, I'm going to pay you $2 times 37 minutes because you also didn't fulfill that. And well, here's the craziest part. I gave her his Instagram. So if she really wanted to make $120, she could have just perused it. She could have just gave me what I wanted and moved on. But instead, I left more sad. I left unresolved. And this is a
Mhm.
risk that we take when we go and try to find answers from a very unexplained and very not understood world. So that was the Brody medium experience. And the last thing I'll say is just out of just out of posterity for myself, I've still not reached out to my friend who gave me her information, and I am sort of afraid to because
Yeah,
what do you do to a recommendation that happened this way, or this is the outcome? And
that wasn't
so
good.
it wasn't good. And she did say I'll give her this much credit. I'll just give her this much credit. She did say sometimes not everybody has a good reading, or the medium it doesn't resonate with the human, which I thought was interesting in terms of certain mediums and the way that they see visions and communicate them back out work for different people, right? Like different learning styles. I can totally sort of see that. But again, like the information was incorrect. But the part that really irked me, the part that got the most under my skin happened in that last text message. She says, "It was really nice to meet you both."
Oh,
And so I didn't say anything back because what I wanted to say back to her was um, not very nice. And I'm trying very hard to not let other people's emotions affect mine.
yeah, I
So,
mean, it shouldn't. It shouldn't. This is like the thing is like with these psychics and mediums is like to our earlier point, like I'm a skeptic, but we've seen it work in some cases, but it's hard to know who is the real deal and who isn't, right? So it is what it is. And honestly, I don't know now that you've done it, like, and now that I'm giving thought to it, like, can you really speak to a past pet? Like, we don't speak the same language, like, are they just like, I don't know. It's interesting, but
it's funny.
I would
It's
see,
funny. It's funny you bring that up because one of the things that I was thinking about the day after the reading and while I was introspecting was, did I show up incorrectly? Did I show up with this notion that like the consciousness of a dog recalls human like memory, or think he didn't even know the name for a table, let alone a rug, let alone a bone. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And
but
so
she specializes in this, right? And she specializes in this. And so if she specializes in it, whether you showed up right or wrong, she got her facts wrong. So regardless of how you think you showed up, like, she point blank lied to you. Like, I know that you and I didn't have any sort of black cat growing up, right? And so that's just factually false. And so she was just trying to hope that she connected and got something. And when she said that she has good readings, it just means sometimes she just says the right thing and she gets lucky. So I don't see. I'm glad you saved your money.
Okay, let's dive into some tea right quick. Here's a clip of actual footage from my reading with the psychic. The video has been redacted and pixelated to protect her identity.
Um, and when I asked about his passing, and he didn't seem to want to give a whole lot of information. He showed me his, and in particular the moment he said my last breath was his breath, the air from his lungs. He and his soul shot straight into the heavens with this powerful white shaft of light, and I heard you screaming with dream. I heard the cleaving apart of your bodies, the intense physical pain of his untimely death. And this was like truly a sword in your heart stealing the most violent rhythms from the world. I felt it in. I'm so sorry that you felt that.
It was pretty awful.
It's so awful.
Now back to Bryan and Jon to sip on their tea.
yeah, I'm glad I advocated for myself. I do feel badly. I do feel badly, which is why I offered to pay her the prorated amount. But when it works, it's very comforting. It's
Yeah.
it's very interesting. It excites me, it invigorates me to think that like we are energy and that we will go not on, I don't want to say on because I'm not necessarily not necessarily sure exactly what I believe in terms of death and sort of what happens there. There have been some great movies like Ghost that sort of exemplify those things. Another one that I really like, Pixar's. Have you seen Soul?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
It talks about afterlife, which I think is actually a really good movie to watch with your kids in terms of
Mhm.
understanding uh, metaphysical sort of themes, anyways. But it invigorates me. It excites me to think that there's more. And when I and like I started this whole statement with, when you find somebody who authentically can connect or whatever it is you want to call it, it's amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Well, I'm glad you had the experience regardless, because, a little more closure each day helps in these situations, whether it's like, legit or not. As long as you're getting, closer to that, that's helpful. But yeah, I mean, well, let's do a reading one day and let's see how it goes.
I think that that would be a great idea. I got to go. Actually, my psychic is calling.
I am a psychic, and I already knew that.
That's why you wrapped it up so perfectly. Oh, I love you, and I will see you in the future. I know that's for sure. So that at least brings me comfort. And because of that, I am going to let you run and tell you that I love you, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
I knew you were going to say that. Likewise. Hey, chat soon.
We'll see you all later. Bye bye.
Bye.
On today's episode of Out Loud and Laughing,
And she basically was able to call out of thin air, who's Jose? And I'm just like, well, granted, Jose is a very common name, but she could have said Juan or Carlos or Marco or I don't know, anything. And she said Jose, and that was our grandfather's name.